as we get to one of our last sections of this chapter 6, we're talking about adding and subtracting rational expressions. So adding and subtracting is actually the most difficult, but if you follow the steps, it does make it a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and start. When adding or subtracting rational expressions, follow these steps. First thing, factor if possible. So that's not changing. You're always still looking to factor first thing. Next, you're going to look for a common denominator. Because remember, in order to add fractions, you need a common denominator. So once you know that common denominator, you're going to multiply any missing factors of the common denominator to the numerator and denominator. Once you do that, you're going to make one fraction. So you will have your entire numerator over one of the common denominators. And then you simplify the numerator. And this is where it's a little tricky. So this is like the hierarchy or the order in which you want to simplify. First thing you want to do is make sure you use brackets or parentheses when you are subtracting. Once you do that, you want to FOIL or distribute, depending on the type of problem, if you have that. After you FOIL or distribute, you can add like terms. You want to look to factor then, and then finally you can cancel like factors. The biggest mistake is people want to be canceling way too soon, and they're not canceling factors. They're canceling terms. So the last thing you should be doing is cancel factors after you do all this other stuff. All right, so let's look at a couple examples. For number 1, if you notice, we already have our common denominator. So pretty straightforward. Since we already have our common denominator, all we have to do, we don't have to multiply any missing factors because we have all of our factors. So we're going to make this one fraction. Okay, so it says you're going to have your entire numerator over the common denominator, one common denominator. So I'll have 2 minus x plus 3x plus 6 over my common denominator, which was x plus 4. And again, now is when we use this simplifying hierarchy. There was no subtraction, so I don't have to worry about this. There's nothing to FOIL or distribute, so I'm going to add like terms next. 3x minus x is 2x, and 2 plus 6 is 8. So 2x plus 8. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do all my simplifying now. So I'm not going to keep writing my denominator for right now until I get to the very bottom here of this simplifying. So next I'm going to factor. In this case I have a GCF of 2. And when I pull that GCF out, I'd have 2 times x plus 4. Now, since that is totally simplified factor to the top, I'm going to put my common denominator back on the bottom. And if you notice, I now have the x plus 4s that would cancel. Because this is a factor, it's times. We'll separate by multiplication. And so I'm left with just 2. And x cannot equal negative 4. So what's kind of crazy about this problem is that no matter what you plug in for x, as long as it's the same number, which what x represents, you get 2 out. All right, as we look at number 2, first, factor if possible. So there's nothing to factor. So now look for a common denominator. When you're looking for your common denominator, I always like to write CD and write the common denominator for this side. You can't leave any factor out that was in the denominator. Everyone must feel included. Everyone gets a participation sticker. So we have x plus 2 as a factor here, so that has to be included. This denominator also has a factor of x plus 3, so that has to be included. So both the factors of the first fraction are already included. As I go to my second fraction has an x plus 2. Well, I already have that included, so my common denominator is just going to be x plus 2 times x plus 3. And then our third step, once we know the common denominator, is where we multiply any missing factors of the common denominator to the numerator and denominator. So this first fraction is not missing any factors from our common denominator. It has both of them. The second fraction has the x plus 2, but it is missing the x plus 3. So I have to multiply top and bottom both by x plus 3. All right, so now it says make one fraction. So my top is going to be 4 plus, and then 2x times x plus 3. And that's all over my common denominator of x plus 2 times x plus 3. So I made it one fraction now, and now we do our simplifying. Okay, so again, now I'm really just focusing on the numerator. So there's no subtracting, so I don't have to worry about that. Now I'm going to FOIL or distribute. In this case, I'm going to distribute the 2x. So I would have 4 plus 2x squared plus 6x. There's no like terms for me to add, but I do want to write it in standard form where we go 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. And now I'm going to factor. So I pull out a GCF of 2. And that would give me 2 times the quantity of x squared plus 3x plus 2. And I can still factor that now with SAM. So the 2 stays in front. Don't lose that GCF. It is important. X times x, what multiplies to 2 and adds to 3, will be positive 2 and positive 1. And then I go ahead, that's totally simplified. And now I put my common denominator back on, x plus 2, x plus 3. And now I can look to cancel factors because everything is separated by multiplication. So in this case, I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2 would cancel. So I'm left with 2, x plus 1, 2 times the quantity of x plus 1 on top, and x plus 3 on the bottom. And then again, any factor that was ever in the denominator would be restricted, so I restrict the x plus 2, so x cannot equal negative 2. And I said x plus 3 equal to 0, x cannot equal negative 3. So a little bit harder as we had to get our common denominator. We'll keep getting a little harder still. So in this case, there's nothing to factor. Our common denominator, we can't leave any factor out. So this factor is x minus 1 included. This is the factor of x minus 2. We have to include that as well. So it is included now. And so our common denominator is going to be both of these factors together, x minus 1 times x minus 2. And so when we go to step 3 here, multiply any missing factors of the common denominator to the numerator and denominator, we look at this first fraction. It has the x minus 1, but it does not have the x minus 2. So I'm multiplying the top and bottom of this first fraction by x minus 2 over x minus 2. The second fraction has x minus 2, but it's missing the x minus 1. So I have to multiply the top and bottom of the second fraction by x minus 1. And then we make it one fraction. Like we say here, make one fraction. So our numerator is going to be 3 times x minus 2. And then I have minus, and one thing it says here is when we're subtracting, use brackets. So we have minus a negative 2 times x minus 1. And that's all over my common denominator. So now we go to the fun part of simplifying. Okay, so again, I'm only worrying about my numerator for right now. So I use the brackets for subtracting. Now I'm going to FOIL or distribute. So I'm going to distribute here. 3x minus 6 minus, and distribute the 2, 2x minus 2. And then I still have to distribute this negative sign through. So I'll be left with 3x minus 6 minus 2x plus 2, which would give me 3x minus 2x is x, negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. I cannot factor that any further, so I'm finished in terms of factoring or simplifying the numerator. I put my denominator on the bottom, and there's nothing else I can cancel. It is what it is. That's what we have. So a lot of times people want to, cancel things, but they can't. In this case, nothing is going to cancel. So we are left with our restriction, x cannot equal 1 or 2. All right, and the last one. First thing we need is our common denominator. And again, we can't leave any factor out. So this fraction has a denominator of x, just the factor of x. This has the factor of x plus 2. So these are two separate factors. I have a factor of x and a factor of x plus 2. So together would be my common denominator. You can't say, oh, well, this one has an x. No, the factor is x plus 2. This is the factor of x. So your common denominator is x times x plus 2. So as we are almost finished, the missing factor, top and bottom. So this has the x, but it's missing the x plus 2. So we're multiply top and bottom by x plus 2. This has the x plus 2, but it's missing the x. So multiply top and bottom by x. We make it one fraction, 8 times the quantity of x plus 2 minus, so I use a bracket, 4x. And that's all over my common denominator of x times x plus 2. All right, so we used the bracket. Now I'm going to FOIL or distribute. So I'm distributing the 8x plus 16, and distributing the minus sign here, minus 4x. And we add like terms next. So 8x minus 4x is 4x plus 16. We factor after that. GCF of 4, which would be 4 times the quantity of x plus 4. And then I put my common denominator on the bottom. And again, in this case, there is nothing that we can cancel out. So we are finished, and I just say x cannot equal 0 or negative 2.